Slavery ended in the United States in 1865, right? Well, here are 5 insidious things about prison labor. Number 1, it was the lone exception to abolition. A while ago, I did one of these videos about modern-day slavery, where I talked about things like child trafficking that do exist here in the United States, but which are illegal and conducted underground. However, there is still one form of slavery that is completely lawful and practiced right out in the open. We don't call it slavery, we call it penal labor. Section 1 of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." And what's so bad about that? If someone is convicted of a crime after due process, why shouldn't the state be able to compel them to do labor for the duration of their sentence, provided it doesn't cross the line to cruel and unusual punishment? Inmates work to allow the state to mitigate the costs of providing them room and board, or to pay back society for their crimes. It sounds reasonable in principle, but it's the way in which penal labor exists in practice where we start to run into some issues. For example, number 2, it promotes incarceration as a solution to social problems. The danger of relying on prison labor too much is that incarceration comes to be viewed not as a means of protecting society from dangerous individuals or rehabilitating or punishing offenders, but as a for-profit enterprise. You can't expect to address the problems of any society simply by locking up the lawbreakers and leaving it at that. Solving social problems requires change, not just from those convicted of crimes, but institutionally, at all levels. That kind of change takes effort and time. And while we're waiting, there are plenty of companies who are only too happy to take advantage of the large and inexpensive labor force provided by the prison population of the United States. Number 3, it's exploited by private industry. So maybe you do some research and you decide that you are not okay with the way prison labor currently works in the United States. And maybe you decide that until something is done to correct that situation, you're just not going to do business with companies that use prison labor. Well, good for you. And good luck with that. Goods and services produced by prisoners are everywhere. Among the mainstream companies which take advantage of penal labor are McDonald's, Walmart, Sears, Microsoft, Nintendo, Starbucks, UPS, AT&T, and Verizon, and there are dozens and dozens more. These prisoners aren't stamping license plates or paving roads. They're producing commercial products to be sold by privately owned for-profit companies. And they're being paid almost nothing, while the companies who exploit them reap the fruits of their labor. Number 4, it incentivizes incarceration. Incarceration is a short-term treatment for some of the symptoms of much deeper problems. It's not a solution to those underlying problems in and of itself. Unfortunately, fixing the problems of society usually takes a back seat when there's money to be made. Prison labor is a separate issue from prison privatization, but the two are related, and both fall under the umbrella of the so-called prison industrial complex. And whether we're talking about privately owned prisons that rely on government contracts, or prisons, both private and state-operated, hiring out their inmates to companies for cheap labor, turning penitentiaries into profit-generating entities creates an incentive to keep them full. What hope is there for efforts to reform the criminal justice system and address the injustices and inequalities that have caused the American prison population to skyrocket over the last 40 years when the government and the private sector each have vested interests in keeping that prison population as large and as productive as possible? Speaking of those inequalities, they are part and parcel of something which our modern institution of prison labor has in common with its 19th century predecessor. Number 5, it's an instrument of white supremacy. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The American prison population is 40% black and 20% Hispanic. The private companies who benefit from the labor of those prisoners are overwhelmingly controlled by whites, as are the federal, state, and local governments under whose authority those prisons operate. Even prisoners who are doing more traditional, non-commercial penal labor are working under the dark, unmistakable shadow of slavery. For example, in the state of Louisiana, which has the highest incarceration rate of any jurisdiction in the world, prisoners work in the Capitol and the governor's mansion, cooking, cleaning, tending the grounds, all under the watchful eyes of white overseers for the convenience of upper-class white officials. Yes, this all looks very familiar. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time. Hey folks, hope you found this one worth watching. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks for watching.